It started with a sharp knock on our cabin door. James and his wife had just moved into what they thought was their dream home by the lake, when trouble came walking up the driveway. On the porch stood her, HOA Karen, blonde bob, haircut pearl, necklace glinting in the morning sun, clipboard clutched like a weapon. Without even a hello, she barked. "You two need to sign these papers. You're required to join the HOA. James frowned. We didn't buy into an HOA. This isn't part of our deed. His wife stepped beside him, calm but firm in her red dress. Karen's eyes narrowed like a hawk. Everyone here answers to me. You'll follow the rules or else. She shoved the clipboard toward them, demanding signatures. When they refused, Karen's face turned crimson. She jabbed her finger in the air. You don't know who you're dealing with. If you won't cooperate, I'll make sure the law does. And with that, she stormed off, heels clacking against the porch. They didn't realize what or else meant until the sirens came. 15 minutes later, the peace of the lakeside was shattered. A piercing siren wailed across the water, echoing off the mountains like a warning shot. James looked at his wife and muttered. She didn't, but she had. A black and white squad car crawled up the gravel driveway, dust swirling behind it. 2 uniformed officers stepped out, adjusting their belts, scanning the scene like they were expecting a burglary, a fight, something real. Instead, they found a cabin, a porch, and one very angry HOA queen, ready to stage her war. Behind them strutted Karen. She marched like a general leading soldiers into battle. Clipboard tucked under her arm, her pink floral cardigan swaying as if it were a royal robe. She raised one finger in the air dramatically and shrieked, "There, that's them." Her voice cracked like a whip as she pointed at James and his wife, standing on the porch. They're refusing to comply with community law. They think they're above us all. The officers exchanged glances. One tilted his head silently, asking the other if this was really what they were dragged out here for. James folded his arms across his chest, standing firm. His wife stayed calm beside him, her red dress bright against the wooden siding of the cabin. James spoke first, voice steady but full of frustration. "Officers, we are not in an HOA. This cabin is ours, deeded, paid for, free and clear. She doesn't have any authority here." Karen's face twisted. She clutched her clipboard as though it were the Constitution itself. "Don't you dare lie. You signed a covenant. Everyone signs it. You're breaking rules, parking violations, lawn care violations, animal restrictions. Everything about you screams non-compliance." Her finger jabbed toward the porch like a dagger, her voice loud enough to make the birds scatter from the trees. One officer rubbed his temple, visibly irritated. The other sighed audibly, already realizing this wasn't the emergency dispatch had promised. But Karen wasn't finished, not even close. She paced in front of the cabin like a prosecutor delivering her closing argument. "These people are disturbing our neighborhood's peace. They're trashing the image we worked so hard to maintain. This isn't just about them, it's about all of us. And I will not allow them to defy me." James raised an eyebrow. "Defy you? You're not the law. You're not even on our property lines." His calm tone only fueled Karen's rage. She stormed up a step onto the porch, pearls bouncing against her chest, face inches from James's wife. Her voice dropped into a venomous hiss. "And you think you're special. You think rules don't apply to you. But let me tell you something, nobody is above the rules. Nobody is above me." For a split second, the entire porch froze. The officers shifted uncomfortably, unsure if this was a civil dispute or the start of something uglier. Neighbors down the road peeked out from behind curtains, drawn by the sound of Karen's screeching voice echoing over the water. It was a CNN HOA spectacle, full of finger-pointing, clipboard waving, and absolute chaos. James's wife stood her ground, her face calm, but her patience razor-thin. She tilted her head slightly, studying Karen as if she were a child throwing a tantrum. Then she took a single step forward, closing the gap between them. Her voice was soft, almost too soft, but carried enough steel to silence the porch. "You really want to play this game, Karen?" Karen smirked, eyes glinting with arrogance. "Oh, sweetheart," she sneered, her English accent slicing through the air like broken glass. "Not only do I want to play, I've already won. You've lost the second you set foot in my neighborhood. You just don't know it yet." She snapped her clipboard open dramatically, flipping through papers as though she had ironclad evidence in her hands. "And when I'm done with you, you'll be begging me for forgiveness." The officers exchanged another glance, one mouthing silently to the other, "Is this woman serious?" But Karen wasn't playing for their approval. She was playing for control. She turned toward them, pointing at James's wife as if identifying a fugitive. "Arrest her. Arrest both of them for non-compliance. They're dangerous to our community." That was at the moment where absurdity collided with reality. One officer pinched the bridge of his nose, muttering under his breath, "This is ridiculous." The other shifted his weight, clearly done with being a pawn in Karen's neighborhood drama. James's wife let out a slow breath. She had given Karen patience, reason, even silence. But enough was enough. She straightened her shoulders, her calm expression hardening into something sharper. She stepped directly into Karen's space. "No fear, no hesitation. You've made a mistake," she said quietly. Karen leaned in, her face twisted with rage. No, sweetheart, you made the mistake, and I'm about to make you pay for it. But what Karen didn't know, what she couldn't have possibly imagined, was that this so-called sweetheart wasn't just a homeowner, she wasn't just James's wife, she was someone with more authority than Karen could ever dream of, and with one move, she was about to flip the entire situation on its head. The cops stood waiting. James stood steady. The neighbors held their breath from behind curtains, and Karen smirked. Certain she had one, she didn't realize. She was already defeated. What happened next flipped the entire scene upside down. For the first time that morning, James's wife moved with intention. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't match Karen's wild energy. Instead, she reached slowly, deliberately, into her bag. The air on the porch shifted thick, heavy, electric. Her eyes never left Karen's face. Karen sneered. Oh, what now? You're going to show me a receipt? A coupon? None of that matters here. I make the rules. She wagged her finger like a teacher scolding a child. The officers sighed clearly, fed up, but they waited. Then, in one smooth, decisive motion, James's wife pulled out a black leather case and flipped it open. A golden emblem caught the sunlight and glowed like fire. For a moment, nobody moved. The porch went silent. The lake beyond them stilled, as if even nature paused to witness what was happening. Karen's jaw dropped. Her finger froze in midpoint, shook ever so slightly. She blinked, like her brain couldn't process what her eyes were seeing. What is that? She stammered, her voice losing the venom it had dripped with seconds earlier. The officers leaned in instinctively, their eyes widening. The taller one straightened, instantly recognizing the seal stamped on the badge. The shorter officer immediately closed his notebook, tucking it into his chest pocket as if to erase the absurdity of what they'd just been dragged into. James's wife finally spoke, her voice calm, deliberate, cutting through the tension like steel through glass. I am a federal agent, and unless you've got real crimes to report, this harassment ends here, right now. The words landed like a hammer. The officers both stiffened. One gave a curt nod of respect. Yes, ma'am? The other turned toward Karen, his expression darkening. You told us this was a legal emergency, that these people were endangering the community. His tone made it clear. He wasn't happy about being lied to. Karen's face drained of color. The smug flush that had animated her cheeks just moments ago evaporated. She stuttered, trying to reclaim her footing. I didn't know she was. I thought she was just. She laughed nervously, a high-pitched, broken sound that fooled no one. This is all a misunderstanding. Just a silly mix-up, no harm done, right? James stepped forward now, smirking, his arms crossed. No, Karen, you thought wrong, and you dragged the police into your little power trip. Karen's eyes darted frantically between the badge, the officers, and the couple standing tall on their porch. The clipboard that had been her sword and shield all morning suddenly felt useless in her hands. She clutched it tighter, like a child clinging to a stuffed toy. The taller officer took a slow step toward her. Ma'am, do you understand what you've done here? Filing a false report? Wasting police resources? This isn't a game. His words sliced deeper than James's smirk ever could. Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Meanwhile, James's wife stood rock still, badge still raised. Eyes locked on Karen with the kind of calm authority that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Her silence said everything. You picked the wrong person to mess with. Karen tried to recover. She waved her hand weakly, chuckling as if she could rewrite the narrative. Oh, come on, officers. You know how it is. Neighborhood disputes. They get blown out of proportion. I was just trying to keep order. That's all. I didn't mean anything by it. But her voice betrayed her. No longer sharp and commanding, it cracked like brittle glass under pressure. Her accent, usually crisp and superior, now wavered. James stepped closer to his wife, protective but amused. Karen, you've been parading around this neighborhood for years, acting like your judge, jury, and executioner, but today, you crossed a line, and you lost. Neighbors began to gather on the street, drawn by the flashing lights of the police car. They whispered to each other, pointing at Karen, who now looked less like the queen of the cul-de-sac and more like a cornered villain exposed in front of her subjects. The shorter officer shook his head, muttering under his breath. We came out here thinking this was serious, and it's just HOA drama. His partner added firmly, not only drama, harassment, big difference. Karen's hands trembled, her clipboard shook. She opened her mouth to protest again, but nothing came out. She looked small, powerless, stripped of the control she had clung to like oxygen. James's wife finally lowered her badge, tucking it back into her bag, but her gaze never wavered. Karen, listen carefully. You do not get to harass us. You do not get to invent laws. And you certainly do not get to waste police time to inflate your ego. This is over. The words hit Karen harder than any fine, any lawsuit, any HOA bylaw ever could. She had been publicly, undeniably defeated. Karen took a shaky step back, her pink cardigan swaying. I didn't realize, she muttered, but the words rang hollow. James cut her off. No, you didn't care to realize. That's the difference. For the first time since the sirens arrived, Karen had no comeback, no smirk, no smug declaration of rules are rules, just silence. And as the officer stood firmly by the couple's side, and the neighbors whispered from across the street, everyone saw it clearly. The HOA tyrant had finally met someone she couldn't bully. For a few heartbeats, the porch was still. The golden glint of the badge had silenced the shouting, silenced even the officers. But silence couldn't hold Karen forever. Her face twitched, first a muscle spasm near her jaw. Then her lips began to curl, trembling with rage that had nowhere to go. And finally, like a volcano that had been simmering too long, she erupted. This is ridiculous. Karen shrieked, her voice climbing into a pitch that rattled the windows. She stomped forward, pearls bouncing against her chest with every furious step. Her clipboard, once her symbol of control, now shook violently in her hand. She jabbed it at James's wife as if it were a weapon. You think you can just wave a shiny badge and end my authority? You think you're above me because of some title? The officers didn't move. They crossed their arms, unimpressed. But Karen didn't see them anymore. Her eyes were wild, locked on the woman in red, like prey she couldn't intimidate. Neighbors were now gathering at the edge of the driveway. Some whispered, others pulled out phones, recording the meltdown. The spectacle was too good, too raw, too Karen. James's wife remained calm, standing tall, arms at her sides, no fear in her eyes. That calmness only poured gasoline on fire. You're nothing here. Karen spat, her accent slicing the air like broken glass. She whipped around, shouting to the neighbors. Do you hear me? Nothing. She doesn't live by our rules. She doesn't care about the standards I've built. I've given this neighborhood order, beauty, perfection, and she wants to tear it all down. James chuckled quietly, shaking his head. Perfection, you mean fear. You've been bullying these people for years. Karen spun on him, finger shaking. Don't you dare talk to me that way. I've fined people into line. I've chased out trash before. I built this neighborhood, the taller officer muttered under his breath. Lady, you're building a lawsuit. His partner smirked but said nothing, letting Karen dig her own grave. But Karen was too far gone. Her voice cracked as she screamed. Without me, this place would collapse? Do you want weeds in your lawns? Rusted cars on your streets? Stray cats everywhere. She slammed her clipboard against her thigh like a gavel. I am the reason this place has value. And you, she jabbed her finger again at the wife. You think you can waltz in here and destroy it all? The neighbors shifted uncomfortably. A few crossed their arms. Some nodded subtly at James's wife, silently cheering her on. Karen's tirade was backfiring. The wife finally spoke, her voice calm, even but laced with power. Karen, the only thing destroying this neighborhood is you. The words sliced through the chaos like a blade. The crowd murmured. Even the officers looked at each other, almost smiling. Karen's face flushed deep red. She clutched her clipboard to her chest like a lifeline. No, you don't get it. I am this neighborhood. I decide who stays, who goes. I am the law here. James stepped down, one step closer, his voice steady. You're not the law, Karen. You're just a bully. With a clipboard, Karen screamed then, an unhinged sound, her carefully cultivated image of class and control crumbling in front of everyone. Her blonde bob shook as she whipped her head around, desperate for someone, anyone, to support her. But the neighbors' eyes told the truth. She was alone. One officer finally stepped in, his voice firm. Ma'am, that's enough. You're escalating something that never should have been an issue. Go home before this becomes a bigger problem for you. Karen snapped toward him, eyes wide with disbelief. Bigger problem? For me? I'm the victim here. I'm the one trying to keep this community in order while freeloaders like them spit in my face. She stomped her foot, cardigan fluttering like a cape. You're all blind? Blind. The shorter officer leaned against the porch railing. Unimpressed, lady. The only blind one here is you. Karen froze, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. The power she clung to had evaporated. The badge, the police, the neighbors, all had turned the spotlight on her. The wife stepped forward again, her calm now radiating like fire. Karen, listen to me very carefully. You've wasted police time. You've harassed us. And you've humiliated yourself in front of your entire neighborhood. This ends now. If you try this again, you'll regret it. Karen's eyes glistened. For a moment, it looked like she might cry, but pride held the tears back. Instead, she straightened her cardigan, lifted her chin, and whispered bitterly. This isn't over. James smirked. Yeah, Karen, it is. The crowd laughed softly, the sound rolling like a wave across the street. The mighty HOA queen, once untouchable, now stood exposed, angry, powerless, and beaten. And in that moment, Karen wasn't feared anymore. She was pitied. The silence that followed Karen's outburst was heavier than the shouting that came before. The neighborhood, once trembling under her voice, now seemed to exhale as if it too was relieved the storm had passed. The birds returned to the trees. The wind rustled the leaves again, and there stood Karen, flushed, disheveled, clutching her clipboard like a life preserver in a sea that had already swallowed her whole. James stood tall, his wife beside him, calm and unshaken. The golden badge wasn't even visible anymore. but its weight lingered in the air. The neighbors gathered along the driveway and peeking through blinds had seen enough. They had witnessed the queen of fines and violations unravel in broad daylight. One of the officers finally broke the silence. "All right," he said firmly, turning to Karen. "We're done here. This was a false report, and you've wasted police resources. Don't make this mistake again, or you'll find yourself facing charges. Do you understand?" Karen swallowed hard. Her lips twitched as if she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. She simply nodded, the fight draining out of her in front of everyone. "Good," the officer said. "Go home." The words were simple but devastating. For years, Karen had sent others home, ordering them to fix their shutters, repaint their fences, move their cars, cut their lawns. Now, for the first time, she was the one dismissed. She turned slowly, her bob swaying stiffly as she marched down the driveway, her cardigan pulled tight around her. Her heels clacked against the gravel, no longer with authority, but with desperation to escape. The neighbors whispered, their voices like daggers. Phones recorded. Karen's reign of fear had cracked, and everyone saw it. James's wife watched, her expression unreadable but steady. She didn't need to say anything. The silence, the badge, and the truth had already spoken louder than any words ever could. As Karen disappeared into the distance, the shorter officer let out a long sigh. "In 20 years, that's the strangest call I've ever had." His partner smirked. HOA drama. Always the same story. They tipped their hats politely to James and his wife, then headed back to their patrol car. The flashing lights turned off, the siren quieted, and the police drove away, leaving behind only the sound of neighbors murmuring in amazement. James put an arm around his wife's shoulders. For the first time all morning, he laughed. "Well," he said, "that was one way to meet the neighbors." His wife smirked, slipping her badge back into her bag. "At least now they know we're not to be messed with." From across the street, a woman who had once cowered under Karen's watchful eye stepped forward. She carried no clipboard, no bylaw, no false authority, just relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know how long we've wanted someone to stand up to her." Others nodded in agreement, one man even clapping quietly before stopping, realizing how surreal it all felt. For years, Karen had been untouchable. Now she was just a woman with too much pride, walking home humiliated. That night, the lake was quiet again. The porch lights flickered on, and James and his wife sat with coffee mugs in hand, watching the moon ripple across the water. The tension had lifted, replaced with peace. "Do you think she'll try again?" James asked. His wife took a slow sip, eyes on the horizon. "Oh, Karen will try. People like her don't change overnight. But now she knows we're not afraid of her. And neither are the neighbors anymore." James smiled, the weight of the day settling into something almost humorous now. "Imagine calling the cops over an HOA membership." His wife chuckled. "Imagine thinking that would scare me." They laughed together, the kind of laugh that comes after chaos, the kind that rebuilds peace. Meanwhile, down the street, Karen sat alone at her dining table. Her clipboard was there, but tonight it felt heavy, useless. She flipped through the bylaws she once brandished like scripture, but the words blurred. Her empire had crumbled not because of rules, but because someone finally stood taller than her voice. For the first time, Karen didn't feel powerful. She felt small. Back at the cabin, James's wife leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. The badge stayed tucked away, silent but powerful. She didn't need to flash it again. Its message had been loud enough the first time. And as the night deepened, the family finally felt what they had wanted all along: peace. Free from HOA harassment, free from Karen's reign, free to live as they chose. The neighbors would talk about the scene for weeks. They'd replay the sirens, the shouting, the badge, the meltdown, and in every retelling, one truth would grow louder. HOA Karen wasn't untouchable anymore. She had finally been defeated not by louder shouting, not by more rules, but by calm authority and the truth. And in the end, that truth was stronger than any clipboard.